So you have created your homebrew world. You have a deeply immersive environment with history and adventure, and you are ready to unleash your colorful band of characters onto your beautiful homebrew world. However, if there's anything to be learned from the first Suicide Squad film, it's that all the colorful characters and all the colorful environments in the world don't matter at all if you don't have anything interesting for them to do. So let's talk villains, or antagonists to be more specific. Today we're going to go through a few archetypes of antagonists, and how best to implement them into your games, and things you should consider when you're matching up your antagonists and your villains with your world, your tone, and your party. As with everything, these ideas are simply just that, ideas. A little something to get your creative juices flowing, and the beauty of tabletop games is that there are never any right or wrong answers to these kinds of things. So let this list serve as a little bit of grease for your wheels of creativity. Your average villains can be broken down into a few basic archetypes if you boil them down long enough. However, that can be messy and ruin your good pots, so let's list them down here verbally. We have the environmental villain, the mastermind, the rival, the force of chaos, the goof troop, and the evil force. Now, occasionally you will be running the kind of campaign that requires you to have no consistent villain at all, but rather a series of difficult circumstances tying together a painful, struggling existence. This is where we feel the oppressive presence of the environmental antagonist. The environmental antagonist is usually the go-to antagonist for a harsh, survival-driven campaign style. However, there are a number of different scenarios that you can implement these kinds of threats to your party. So, what is an environmental antagonist? Simply put, it is a place that is hostile and inhospitable to the point that it is seeking to hurt, kill, injure, or otherwise impede the party. By simply existing in the environment, the party is in danger. Now, over the years, this kind of antagonist has been represented in a number of different ways to varying success. As a dungeon master, you have a lot of different options on how you want to present this kind of antagonist. And the first instinct, of course, is to grab your encounter and event tables and get rolling. And that's not a bad idea. In truth, the environment should never feel like it is specifically out to get the party, and random tables is a good way to kind of balance that sort of thing. For your environmental antagonist really has no vendetta, it has no ire towards the party or really anyone else that exists in it. It is harsh and is inhospitable to all people there. So it's a good idea to kind of play with it a little bit, and even if the tables aren't exactly to your liking, it's a good idea to just tweak some stuff or even make your own. But always make it feel like things are harsh but also random, so it never feels like things are directly coming down for anybody. Occasionally, particularly in movies, an antagonistic environment will be given a kind of personality, like a roaring monster that the characters are trying to defeat. Armageddon does this a lot. When they go to the asteroid, the asteroid occasionally roars and shudders and seems to react to the things that the protagonists are doing when they're drilling their hole and dropping their bomb into it, to the point that they even added animal sounds in the movie when the asteroid is acting up. This idea, as silly as it seems, has a grain of useful information in it. So you have to characterize your environment. Your environment isn't necessarily living and thinking, but it should still feel alive. And for that reason, when you are characterizing an environmental antagonist, you have to realize that as Dungeon Master, your descriptions are doing a ton of the heavy lifting. So you have to be very careful in detailing the terrain, how it feels. When your party sets up camp, there's the hissing of poisonous gases from a swamp, the burbling of a nearby stream, and a splashing as a tail moves through the water. The wind is cold and harsh as it moves through the trees, and yellow and green eyes peer at you from the darkness. You hear a beat of wings. You cannot tell the size, but the creature is near. This will need to be a watchful night. And that's the kind of thing that you need to do. This is, of course, an example. I don't even know if that's my best description. But you basically need to be on for that all the time. You need to keep that tension up for your players the entire time they're interacting with the environmental antagonist, because they need to realize that the environmental antagonist is a threat to them as long as they remain in the environment. And you have a ton of tools at your disposal. The cool thing about environmental antagonists is that you don't get to talk, you don't get to monologue and that kind of thing. You get to describe a ton of threats. The environmental antagonist has a legion of minions that all live within it. Monsters and beasts, the native residents of the environment. It has traps that are not traps. They are just hazards. That's another fun trip. Sliding rocks, falling trees, quicksand, all these kinds of things, poisonous flowers and mushrooms. Not necessarily traps. Cannot be detected by finding trap spells. Still hazards that the players have to endure. So feel free to get creative with it. Think about what lives in your environmental antagonist environment and use those things against the players. Those are your henchmen. Those are your foot soldiers. And the traps are the environmental hazards. They're broken trees. They're sticky swamps. They're falling rocks. All those kind of things. Remember them and utilize them in your descriptions. And if you're a dungeon master that struggles with descriptions and struggles with kind of establishing that good immersive environment through your presentation to your players, an environmental antagonist is a good way for you to flex those muscles. So if you're not good at that, introduce some more harsh environmental antagonists to your players. Do it slowly, little bits and pieces, because this is something that can be slid very easily into the middle of your campaign. After an escape attempt or running away, you can isolate your players in a harsh place. And just really work on this to try and bring them up to a certain level. You got to go full Tolkien on it. Good example of this, if you're looking for a book reference, is actually Out of the Abyss. All of the Underdark sections do an excellent job of putting you in an environmental antagonist. So there's a good jumping off point and a good reference. So next up, we got one of my favorites, the Mastermind. Your tactical players will love him, and your aggressive players will wonder why they can't just punch him in his stupid face. The Mastermind is your man behind the curtain, pulling the strings, making plans, while the party struggles in his dark machinations. He is laughing at home, sipping cognac. There are actually a ton of different approaches when it comes to the Mastermind. You can do a powerful ruler, a criminal leader, a disguise master. The list goes on and on and on. However, all masterminds generally have a few common traits that make them masterminds. They're cunning, intelligent, careful, confident. They usually have henchmen and foot soldiers, or both. And most importantly, they always have clever and detailed plans. Along with a wide variety of masterminds, there's also a ton of different ways to play them as a dungeon master. With that in mind, there's always a few best practices that you should keep in mind when it comes to characterizing your masterminds within the campaign. They should always feel like a devious, imposing presence. Your mastermind should always be skilled at keeping the party at arm's length, usually just out of reach of their attacks, until you are ready for a grand climax. You can do this a lot of different ways. You can keep the identity of the mastermind a secret until a grand reveal, or you can have them making moves from a grand fortress or hideout. BioShock is a very good example of this. Andrew Ryan in BioShock is a constant presence throughout the game. He is the mastermind. He's constantly working to thwart you as the protagonist, and you don't even get to see him face to face until close to the end of the game. And alternatively, I guess spoilers for BioShock 1, Atlas is a good example of a disguise mastermind because he moves you along every step of the way and he's right in front of you the entire time and you don't know he's there. So, two great masterminds in BioShock. It's a good game. You should check it out. Here's why this is important as a dungeon master. The moment your players can retaliate against your mastermind, he loses all threat and mystique. Now, nothing destroys the threat and the presence of your mastermind faster than having them get immediately shit-kicked by your rowdy party. That kind of breaks the entire thing. So it is important to have either an escape attempt or some plan to keep your mastermind out of the reach of your party until you want that climactic battle. I know I kind of said this already in the beginning, but I really want to reiterate it on how important it is, because you do need to think ahead of your players. If you put your mastermind in front of your players, and man is it tempting, because you want that dude to monologue and do an evil laugh and stuff, but you need to remember, if he's physically there, your players will destroy him. They will find a way to get to him, and they'll kick his ass. And after that, he's not threatening anymore. It's done. That trick only lasts until that moment, and then it's over. Now, another thing to be careful about with your mastermind is that your mastermind should be very smart. They should know a lot of things. They can't be omniscient. They can't just know everything seemingly out of nowhere, because that kind of demoralizes your party. It makes it almost impossible for the party to outsmart them because they just kind of know everything somehow out of nowhere, and there's no explanation for it. A good example of how somebody can screw this up and make the villain kind of unbelievable and seemingly unoutsmartable is Batman v Superman. Lex Luthor is constantly aware of everything and every secret and all the events that are going on in the world at all times, but it's never shown how he knows those things, and it gets really ridiculous really quickly. So a good thing to remember with your mastermind is if something comes up that they know, you need to provide a reasonable explanation on how they know it. The more that your mastermind just conveniently knows things because you need them to without any explanation, the less your players will feel like they can pull something over on the mastermind. And there will be no greater player satisfaction moment than when your party pulls one over on the mastermind and gets him with something that he doesn't know. So in short, masterminds need to be smart, but the things they know need to make sense. They don't usually get involved personally in things, usually preferring to use pawns or henchmen. They usually have a barrier or something keeping the party from fighting them directly. That barrier can be moral, political, physical, emotional, magical, intangible, all kinds of things. Get creative with it, but remember to always leave in the hope that someday your players can get to your mastermind. Masterminds are versatile villains. They can be fit into most campaigns easily and offer a variety of encounters and scenarios and types. So they're the most fun to use and play with in-game. Next up, we have the rival. They always seem to be competing with you. Sometimes they are ahead, and other times you are ahead of them. They're a constant reminder of how far you both have to go. The rival is usually more of an antagonist than they are a villain. But the evolutionary chart of the rival very easily branches off both into friend and villain territory, depending on how the party wants to approach it. There are many different paths to take with a rival NPC antagonist, and it's easiest to think of it like positions on a highway. If your rival is stuck behind the party, always trying to get ahead of them in fame, fortune, money, accomplishing quests, whatever, there's a large chance that the rival will come to resent the party and more easily slide into a villain role. That's kind of the more organic way to look at things. If the most recent Pokemon games are any indication, there is a possibility to make a rival who is always lagging behind slide into a friendship category. However, be careful to do this because it ends up just kind of blowing your rival into not a serious contender of any kind against your party. It just kind of makes them a flop. It's like the rival that's always trying to be your friend in Pokemon is just like, oh, I don't care that you beat me. We're the best friends. It's going to be great. I'll do better next time. And he doesn't. And it's all kind of lost. And every time he shows up, you just roll your eyes and go, this guy again. So that's one way to do the rival. The next one is to imagine the position next to the party. So driving side by side, racing each other. Sometimes one pulls ahead. Sometimes the other one pulls ahead. This one is more likely to kind of shift into a friendly composition zone, or it could also easily slip into a villain zone. It has a lot of functionality onto which way it can go. So when you have a rival that is not necessarily on par with the party, but is constantly like jockeying for position with them, sometimes they're ahead, sometimes they're behind, back and forth, over and over. That does create a scenario where it's like not necessarily gonna stay in the villain mode, because the party does frequently feel like they get one over on the rival, and the rival frequently feels like they get one over on the party, if it does end up being very even like that, but also easily sliding into, okay, well, we've got this friendly competition going on, and now I've gotten to know you, and maybe we're friends. It can really go either way. It's kind of the wild card position. You can definitely do a lot to play with it. Maybe your rival decides that they're going to get an edge over the party by acquiring a dangerous magical item, or going into a encounter that is far too harsh for them, or maybe just taking up with somebody who is maybe a bit more evil or has different morals, and that whole thing rubs the party the wrong way. There's a lot of different ways that can slip in, but again, an equal rival, the party is more likely to adopt them as a friend, but that could also play to your advantage. The cool thing about rivals, before we get into the last position, is that it creates an antagonist that the party gets to spend a lot of time with without murdering and develop a relationship with. So if your rival does turn full villain from antagonist, it hurts that much more because the party knows them well. It's not just some faceless goon or some, mastermind taunting them from a tower. It's a friend. It's somebody they got to grow with and get to know that is now turned on them. And it's a bit more heart-wrenching, and you can really pull those strings on your party if they're susceptible, that kind of thing, with that kind of flip. The next position I think is a really fun one, is where the rival is leading the party. Not necessarily physically leading the party like he's the party leader. Like, the rival is ahead of the party, and the party sees the rival as, doing much better than they are. This creates a scenario where you can create an antagonist that is very outwardly good and nice and kind and maybe even, pities the party a little bit. But your party will grow to hate them more often than not, in my experience. Your mileage may vary. Because they do frequently seem so much better at everything than the party. When you're characterizing this person, it's really easy to get it, okay, we're chasing down this bounty, and you get there, and the guys just wipe the floor, the rival has wiped the floor with everybody, and has already defeated the warlord, and it's like, oh, thank goodness you guys made it. Were you hurt? Hey, we could split the bounty, it'll be alright. It'll make them angry, and they'll start to hate them. And sometimes it'll be worse if they're nice. But it creates a very antagonistic relationship with what appears to be a very good character from the party's perspective. So it's a ton to play with in that regard. Also has a high potential to shift into the friend zone. Or if the party ever defeats the leading rival, or surpasses the leading rival, that person also slips very easily into a full-on villain turn in the future as well. So those are fun people to play with and kind of build up as antagonists. I love to play with rivals. They're very interesting. They create dynamic relationships with the party if you have a party that's susceptible to that kind of thing. And there's just a lot of fun things you can do with twists and turns on them. But be careful with your rivals. Make sure they're fully developed characters, because it can kind of destroy the illusion if your rival is really nice and friendly and cool with the party, and then all of a sudden there's a heel turn to villainy. If you are going to flip them, you need to make sure that you're conscious of how they've interacted with the party, how you've characterized them, and try to make sure that as a character, their turn to villainy makes sense. Establish the things that are important to your rival antagonist so that you can establish in the future, if you do desire to take them on an evil turn, that they're willing to sacrifice things to get that. And then you'll have a much more dynamic and interesting rival character. Now, some men aren't interested in fame or money. Some men just want to watch the world burn. Or patent fish. Or put butts on all the faces of all the statues. These are your forces of chaos. These villains don't have a plan. They're just dogs chasing cars. That's the last of the Joker references, I promise. Your force of chaos villain usually has no greater goal other than to cause chaos, spread trouble, and death wherever they go. This usually requires them to be pretty powerful or resourceful. If they're just some random dude who started setting outhouses on fire, it would have been dealt with pretty quickly, likely by an angry village full of people tired of shitting in the woods. With that in mind, it's not uncommon to make your force of chaos villain some kind of demigod, or maybe some kind of creature with superhuman abilities. Alternatively, they can be a regular mortal who has, some item of great power that's allowing them to fight off anybody who tries to stop them. Forces of Chaos are great because they don't need a plan. They don't even need minions or henchmen most of the time. They just need to show up and start fucking shit up. Because that's all they want. The goal does not need to make sense to the party. It makes sense to the villain, and that's all that matters. things to remember when you're playing your Force of Chaos villain is that it's not always a great idea to have them focus on the party. If your Force of Chaos is obsessed with fighting the party, it gives them a goal and a direction. It takes away from the chaotic nature that the character is supposed to embody. And at the end of the day, your party should have a relationship with your Force of Chaos like firefighters have with an arsonist. Constantly having to deal with the aftermath of whatever crazy idea has gotten into their head this week, and then trying to figure out how to stop them before they do the next thing. Another thing that's important to remember, the Joker only works as a Force of Chaos archetype because he knows that Batman won't kill him. Your party will likely have uncomplicated feelings about killing your Force of Chaos. So if you want your Force of Chaos to be more than a one-shot encounter villain, you need to give them an escape plan or something to fend off the first party's attack, or they're gonna be done. It's the standard fuck around and find out move, and the party will ensure that your Force of Chaos finds out if you let them. So, same thing with the Mastermind. You need to remember that if you want your Force of Chaos to stick around, you can't let your party have at him. I don't care how good you think his stats are. I don't care how much you think he can win the fight. Your party will defeat him. Your parties are smarter and more resourceful and will have better dice rolls than you ever plan out in your head. Never fails, every time. Next up, prepare for trouble and make it double. It's the Goof Troop. I love Goof Troops as villains. I love them. I love them so much. They have a few key traits. They're strange and delightful. They're not seeking to kill the party. Most of the time, they're looking to either take something away from the party or capture the party for some reason. They're largely incompetent, but also resourceful somehow, able to conjure elaborate traps or constructs or costumed weirdness to trick the party or try and get at them. They escape every battle when their plans are foiled, and they're recurring antagonists. And a high potential to transfer into the friend zone, of course. Or, more terrifying, the slim possibility to transfer into a darker villain. Now, 9 times out of 10, the Goof Troop are actually henchmen for a Mastermind. However, that almost doesn't matter, because a lot of times the Mastermind for a Goof Troop is so far removed from what the Goof Troop is actually doing, the party will almost never encounter them. And that's fine. That makes the Goof Troop the de facto main villain for the storyline. And so you can roll with your Goof Troop as your main villains and just maybe reveal the Mastermind later, or don't reveal them at all. Maybe the Mastermind cut the Goof Troop loose years ago, and they're just going about their business, thinking that they can get back into the Master's good graces. That's even funnier. I like that setup. That's basically Team Rocket, the de facto Goof Troop. Now, with all that said, your Goof Troop is usually served best as a kind of side villain. They follow the party through various storylines, sticking with the party through unconnected adventures, and even lending a hand occasionally when goals align. Most Goof Troops are not inherently evil. They're usually part of an evil organization or have aspirations to be like a famous villain or a famous bandit, and that makes them pretty pliable and prone to full-on conversions into party friends. Again, if you want your Goof Troop to stick around for multiple encounters, you need to be sure that they have an exit strategy, because your party will kill them. In the end, it is up to you how quickly you want that to happen. It's coming. And it's ready to destroy everything you know and kill everyone you love. It's the evil force. Where the Mastermind is an evil surgical tool, the evil force is an evil jackhammer. Over and over, you try to stop it, but it keeps coming, either by sheer power or enormous strength of numbers. Everyone who stands against it falls. You can fight it for a while, but in the end, you know you have to run to survive, until you can find a way to properly defeat it. Forces of evil have a lot of variations on how you can characterize them. It can be a powerful warlord, seeking to crush everything in their way, or it can be a cold, unfeeling force that sweeps through everything, seeking only to kill. It's actually Thanos is a good example of an evil force, because he's not interested in elaborate plans or outsmarting anyone. He accomplishes nearly all of his goals through brute force, in one form or another. Most zombie plagues are evil forces. The White Walkers from Game of Thrones are an evil force. You get the idea. So your evil force can be a singular, incredibly powerful individual, or just a massive army of unfeeling killing machines. Either way, when your players fight the evil force, it should feel like the game just got jacked up to hard mode. It should feel like there's not a chance to win when you're fighting against the evil force. Your players should feel like their only options are to escape, or hide, or buy some time until they can find a safe place to go. The evil force should constantly feel like it is completely unbeatable. That is to say that your evil force does not need to be completely unbeatable. It just needs to feel that way. Your evil force, usually in a narrative sense, is defeatable by either finding a certain amount of allies or getting the right coalition together to stand against it, or maybe finding some information that helps you defeat the evil force, or maybe acquiring some kind of magical item or group of magical items that helps you stand against the evil force. However you want to do it, the party should feel like they're on their heels at all times while they search for whatever they need to be able to take the evil force down. Now, as far as your goals, your evil force tends not to have any complicated goals. It's usually just about destroying everything, death and destruction sweeping over the land like a blanket of fire. The reason for this is somewhat by design. So you have to consider your evil force. If your evil force has an end goal that is tangible and can be accomplished, the idea easily slips in for the party that this is something that will end. And then after a few encounters with your evil force, maybe your party starts to think, oh, well, hey, maybe if we just give them what they want, it won't be so bad, and then we don't have to fight them anymore. It takes a little bit of the threat out of your evil force if it can be placated with something. Kudos to you if you can find something valuable enough to the party that the evil force needs to accomplish its goals that the party just will not give up no matter what, no matter how hard it gets. That's incredible, and that's a beautiful breakdown if you can get that to happen. But most of the time, usually unambiguous goals roll over everything like a plague. And that's your evil force. And that's your villains. Please take these tools and use them well to strike fear, delight, and laughter in all of your parties. And we'll see you next time on Puck's Home Brewery. Thanks for watching.